Poseidon, who shakes the land and the boundless sea. These words, taken from Homer's Odyssey, echo as a reminder of the relentless power of the oceans. For millennia, the sea has been both a cradle of life and a graveyard of civilizations. Beneath its dark, unfathomable waters lie entire cities, lost worlds that defy our understanding of history. But here's the mystery. How did these cities get there? Would they be victims of natural disasters, such as tsunamis, earthquakes, and rising sea levels? Or could they be evidence of advanced civilizations, much older than history books dare admit? The truth is that the ocean, with its vastness and depth, holds more secrets than we can imagine. Only 20% of the seabed has been mapped to date. This means that 80% of the ocean remains unexplored, an uncharted territory that may hide not only submerged cities but also answers to questions that have long tormented us. What happened to these civilizations? Were they destroyed by natural forces or by your own arrogance? And, most importantly, what can these stories teach us about the future of humanity? Today, we're diving into the depths of the ocean and history to explore the planet's most intriguing underwater cities. From myths like Atlantis to the real ruins of Dorka, India, and Yonaguni, Japan. Let's investigate what these cities tell us about humanity's past. Get ready for a journey that mixes science, archaeology, and a touch of mystery, as we try to uncover the secrets that the sea has hidden for millennia. The oceans have always been a symbol of mystery and power. Since ancient times, humanity has looked at the sea with a mixture of fascination and fear. He was both a source of life and a destructive force, capable of shaping the destinies of entire civilizations. For the ancient Greeks, the sea was ruled by Poseidon, the god who could both grant calm and unleash devastating storms. For the Polynesians, the ocean was home to creator gods, who shaped the islands and gave rise to life. And for the Norse, the sea was a battlefield between divine forces, where Aegir, the god of the depths, reigned supreme. But while the sea was revered, it was also feared. After all, he didn't just sustain life, he also destroyed it. And throughout history, the ocean has proven to be an implacable enemy. It swallowed cities, erased cultures, and turned what was once dry land into a submerged kingdom of silence and darkness. The story of underwater cities begins with the fragile relationship between humanity and the environment. During the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, sea levels were up to 120 meters lower than today. This means that vast areas of land, which are now underwater, were habitable. Imagine this: coastal regions that are now miles underground were, back then, fertile plains where human communities thrived. But as the ice began to melt, the oceans rose, slowly swallowing these lands. It was a gradual but relentless process, and, for those who lived there, it must have seemed like the end of the world. But not all submerged cities can be explained by climate change. Some appear to have been victims of catastrophic events, occurring within a matter of hours or days. A famous example is the city of Hellike in ancient Greece. Known as the Atlantis of Greece, Hellike was swallowed by the sea in a single night, around 373 BC, after an earthquake followed by a tsunami. Ancient accounts describe how the entire city disappeared, leaving only a salt lake where streets and temples once stood. For centuries, Hellike was considered a myth, until archaeologists found its ruins submerged in the Gulf of Corinth, proving that the legend had a grain of truth. And then there are the myths. Atlantis, perhaps the most famous example, was described by Plato as an advanced civilization that disappeared in a single day and night of misfortune. According to Plato, Atlantis was a powerful island with technology and culture far beyond its time. But her arrogance and greed aroused the wrath of the gods, who destroyed her in a cataclysm. Although many believe that Atlantis is just an allegory, others argue that it may have been inspired by real events, such as the eruption of the Santorini volcano. which devastated the Minoan civilization around 1600 BC. But what makes these stories so fascinating is that they are not just myths. Around the world, archaeologists are discovering evidence of sunken cities that challenge our understanding of history. And this is where science meets mystery. An intriguing example is the city of Pavlopetri in Greece, which is considered the oldest submerged city in the world. Dating back to around 5,000 years ago, Pavlopetri was discovered in 1967 and revealed impressive urban planning with streets, houses, and even drainage systems. This suggests that the people who lived there had an advanced knowledge of engineering and architecture. But what happened to Pavlopetri? Why was she abandoned and swallowed by the sea? Scientists believe the city was the victim of a combination of earthquakes and rising sea levels. But the mystery remains. Another fascinating example is the city of Dwarka, India. Mentioned in Hindu sacred texts, Dwarka was described as a magnificent city built by the god Krishna. For centuries, it was believed that Dwarka was just a myth. But in 2001, underwater archaeologists discovered submerged ruins off the coast of Gujarat that appeared to match ancient descriptions. Stone structures, streets, and even harbors have been found, suggesting that Dwarka may have been one of the most advanced cities of its time. But just like Pavlopetri, Dwarka was also swallowed by the sea, leaving behind only fragments of its former glory. And then there's the Yonaguni Monument in Japan, discovered in 1986. This collection of submerged structures appears to include staircases, platforms, and even what some believe to be a pyramid. However, scientists are divided. Is Yonaguni a work of nature or a human creation? And if it is human, who built it, and why? Some researchers suggest that Yonaguni may be evidence of a lost civilization, much older than any known. Others argue that the formations are natural, carved by currents and erosion. But regardless of the answer, Yonaguni continues to intrigue and challenge our understanding of the past. These sunken cities are not just relics of the past. They are testaments to human ingenuity and the ability to adapt. But they are also reminders of our vulnerability. After all, if these civilizations, with all their knowledge and resources, were unable to resist the forces of nature, what does that say about us? Are we really prepared to face the challenges that the future holds for us? And, perhaps more importantly, what do these cities tell us about human history? Are they just examples of civilizations that have succumbed to natural disasters? Or are they evidence of something deeper? Something we still cannot fully understand? These are the questions that drive us to keep exploring, to keep diving into the depths of the ocean in search of answers. If sunken cities are now a mystery, shrouded in silence, there was a time when they were the beating hearts of prosperous civilizations. Before being swallowed by the sea, these cities were centers of innovation, commerce, and culture. They represented the pinnacle of human ingenuity, defying the limitations of their time and creating legacies that, even submerged, still echo in history. Think of Pavlopetri, Greece. Today, it is just a collection of submerged ruins, but 5,000 years ago, it was a vibrant city with well-planned streets, stone houses, and even drainage systems. That's right. While many civilizations were still struggling to master agriculture, the inhabitants of Pavlopetri were already building sewage systems to improve their quality of life. And it doesn't stop there. Archaeological studies showed that Pavlopetri was an important commercial center, with strategic access to the Aegean Sea. Ships loaded with goods docked at their ports, bringing not only goods, but also ideas and innovations from other cultures. It was a connected city, an example of how maritime trade shaped the ancient world. And then we have Dwarka, India. If Pavlopetri was an example of urban planning, Dwarka was a symbol of grandeur. According to sacred Hindu texts, the city was built by the god Krishna himself, with 70,000 palaces made of gold, silver, and other precious stones. While these descriptions may seem exaggerated, submerged ruins discovered off the coast of Gujarat suggest that Dwarka was, in fact, an impressive city. Carefully carved stone structures, wide streets, and well-planned harbors indicate that its inhabitants had an advanced knowledge of engineering and architecture. Furthermore, Dwarka's strategic location made it an important commercial hub, connecting India to other parts of Asia and the Middle East. It was a city that prospered thanks to its ability to adapt and innovate. But perhaps the most intriguing example of success and innovation comes from the Yonaguni Monument in Japan, although there is still debate about its origin. Whether it is natural or artificial, many researchers believe that Yonaguni's underwater structures are evidence of an advanced civilization that existed more than 10,000 years ago. If this is true, Yonaguni would be one of the oldest civilizations ever discovered, defying everything we know about human history. The formations include staircases, platforms, and even what appears to be a pyramid, suggesting a level of sophistication that should not have existed at that time. And if Yonaguni really was built by humans, it raises a fascinating question. Who were these people? And how did they manage to create something so impressive in such a remote time? These cities were not just centers of technological innovation, they were also cultural centers. In Baiae, Italy, for example, culture and luxury went hand in hand. Known as the Las Vegas of ancient Rome, Baiae was a haven for the rich and powerful. Roman emperors such as Nero and Caligula frequented the city, which was famous for its baths, palaces, and extravagant parties. But Baiae was not just a playground for the elite, it was also a center of innovation. The Roman engineers who built the city were masters of hydraulics, creating heating systems for the baths and canals to supply the city with fresh water. It was a city that combined luxury and functionality, showing how engineering can be used to improve the quality of life. Another fascinating example of innovation comes from Thonis Heracleion in Egypt. This city, which was submerged by the Nile Delta about 1,200 years ago, was an important commercial and religious center. Thonis Heracleion was the main entry point into Egypt, connecting the Mediterranean to the Nile River. Archaeologists who explored its submerged ruins found temples, giant statues, and even gold coins, indicating that the city was a center of wealth and power. But what really impresses is the engineering behind Thonis Heracleion. The city's inhabitants built ports and canals that allowed the efficient transport of goods, showing an impressive mastery of hydraulics and logistics. And then there is Atlantis. Although its existence has never been proven, Plato's descriptions suggest that it was a civilization far ahead of its time. According to Plato, Atlantis was a powerful island with advanced technology and culture. Its inhabitants built irrigation, canals, sophisticated defense systems, and even machines that, according to some scholars, could be interpreted as a primitive form of technology. Although many consider Atlantis to be a myth, the idea of such an advanced civilization continues to capture the imagination of scientists and dreamers. But what do all these cities have in common? They prospered because they knew how to take advantage of the sea's resources. The ocean wasn't just a threat, it was a source of wealth, connection, and innovation. These cities used the sea for trade, agriculture, and even defense. They were examples of how humanity can adapt and thrive in challenging environments. However, there is a tragic irony here. The same sea that brought wealth and prosperity to these cities was also responsible for their destruction. Pavlopetri, Dwarka Baiae, Thonis Heracleion, they were all swallowed by the ocean, victims of forces beyond human control. And that leads us to an uncomfortable question. Have these cities gone too far? Has their dependence on the sea made them vulnerable? Or was his downfall simply the result of inevitable fate? These questions have no easy answers. But what we do know is that these cities represent the pinnacle of human ingenuity. They are a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, humanity has the capacity to innovate, adapt, and thrive. And although they are now submerged, their stories continue to inspire us. If the heyday of these sunken cities was marked by innovation and prosperity, their falls were a cruel reminder that no matter how advanced a civilization may be, it is never completely immune to the forces of nature or its own failings. What happened to these cities? Were they victims of inevitable natural disasters? Or was their destruction accelerated by human choices, greed, and arrogance? The answer, as always, lies in the depths, both of the ocean and of history. Let's start with Hellike, the Atlantis of Greece. Around 373 BC, this prosperous Greek city was swallowed by the sea in a single night. Ancient accounts describe a devastating earthquake, followed by a tsunami that wiped Hellike off the map. But what makes this story even more intriguing is the context. Hellike was dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes. Some believe that the city's destruction was seen as divine punishment, retribution for the arrogance of its inhabitants. But modern scientists have a more earthly explanation. Hellike was located in an active seismic region, and its destruction was the result of geological forces that were beyond human control. Still, the idea that a city dedicated to the sea god was destroyed by the sea itself is ironic, to say the least. And then there's Baiae, the Las Vegas of ancient Rome. Unlike Hellike, Baiae was not destroyed outright. Its fall was slow, almost imperceptibly, like a tide that slowly rises. For centuries, Baiae was a refuge for the Roman elite, a place of luxury, decadence, and excess. But over time, the city began to sink. This was caused by a phenomenon called bradycism, where the ground rises and falls due to underground volcanic activity. Today, the ruins of Baiae are underwater, but they still preserve mosaics, columns, and statues that give us a glimpse of their former glory. But here's the curious detail. While Baiae was sinking, Rome was in decline. The fall of Baiae is, in some ways, a reflection of the fall of the Roman Empire, a reminder that even the most powerful empires are vulnerable to the forces of nature and time. But not all falls were caused by natural disasters. Some were the result of human choices. Choices that, in retrospect, seem almost suicidal. An example is Thonis Heracleion in Egypt. For centuries, this city was an important commercial and religious center, connecting the Mediterranean to the Nile River. But around the 8th century, Thonis Heracleion began to sink. Scientists believe this was caused by a combination of factors: rising sea levels, soil instability, and perhaps most importantly, the overexploitation of natural resources. The inhabitants of Thonis Heracleion built canals, harbors, and temples on land that was already unstable. And this may have accelerated the city's collapse. It's a story that sounds familiar, doesn't it? A civilization that thrives at the expense of the environment, only to be destroyed by it. And then we have Yonaguni, Japan. While there is still debate about the origin of Yonaguni's underwater structures, one thing is certain: if they were built by humans, their collapse was catastrophic. Some researchers suggest that Yonaguni was destroyed by a tsunami, while others believe that the city was swallowed by the sea due to rising ocean levels after the last ice age. But what makes Yonaguni so controversial is the fact that, if it really was built by humans, that means an advanced civilization existed much earlier than we believe. This challenges the conventional narrative of the story and raises uncomfortable questions. What else is hidden beneath the sea? And why don't we know more about this? But perhaps the most famous and most controversial fall is that of Atlantis. According to Plato, Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune. The island was swallowed by the sea, leaving behind only legends and speculation. But what really happened? Some believe that Atlantis was inspired by the eruption of the Santorini volcano, which devastated the Minoan civilization around 1600 BC. Others suggest that Atlantis never existed, that it was just an allegory created by Plato to illustrate the dangers of arrogance and greed. But there are those who believe that Atlantis was real, an advanced civilization that was destroyed by its own hubris. And if this is true, what does it tell us about the future of humanity? These falling stories are not just tragedies, they are warnings. They remind us that no matter how advanced a civilization may be, it is never completely immune to the forces of nature or its own flaws. But they also raise uncomfortable questions. Why have so many of these cities been forgotten? Why don't we know more about them? And what does this say about the way we tell and retell the story? Part of the answer lies in the nature of the ocean itself. The sea is a relentless keeper of secrets. It swallows cities, erases cultures, and transforms what was once dry land into a submerged kingdom of silence and darkness. But part of the answer also lies in us. For centuries, humanity ignored submerged cities, dismissing them as myths or curiosities. It's only in the last few decades that we've begun to seriously explore the seabed, using technologies like sonar and underwater robots to map the depths. And what we found is surprising and disturbing. For example, in 2001, underwater, archaeologists discovered submerged ruins off the coast of Gujarat, India, that appeared to match descriptions of Dwarka, the city mentioned in sacred Hindu texts. But instead of celebrating the discovery, many dismissed it as a coincidence. Why? Because if Dwarka really existed, that means India's history is much older and much more complex than we believe. And this is something that not everyone is willing to accept. The same goes for Yamnaguni. Despite evidence that underwater structures may be man-made, many scientists remain skeptical. They argue that the formations are natural, carved by currents and erosion. But what if they are wrong? What if Yanaguni is evidence of a lost civilization, far older than any known? This wouldn't just change the way we see history. It would completely rewrite it. And then there are the ethical questions. The exploration of submerged cities is not without problems. In many cases, these ruins are plundered by treasure hunters who destroy valuable artifacts in search of profit. This not only harms scientific research, but also erases important parts of history. Furthermore, underwater exploration is expensive and technically challenging, meaning many of these cities remain unexplored, their secrets still hidden beneath layers of sand and coral. But perhaps the biggest controversy of all is what these cities tell us about ourselves. They are a reminder that no matter how advanced a civilization may be, it is never completely immune to the forces of nature or its own flaws. They challenge us to look at the past with new eyes and to question what we know about our own history. And, perhaps most importantly, they remind us that the future of humanity is largely in our own hands. I am Poseidon, who shakes the land and the boundless sea. These words, which echoed at the beginning of our journey, now take on a new meaning. For if there's one thing we've learned from exploring sunken cities, it's that the sea isn't just a destroyer, it's also a guardian. It holds secrets, stories, and lessons that, if we know how to listen, can help us understand not only the past, but also the future. Sunken cities are more than just ruins. They are silent testaments to human ingenuity, to our ability to create and innovate, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. They show us that even thousands of years ago, people were building planned cities, developing advanced technologies, and connecting cultures through trade and exploration. Pavlopetri, Dorka, Baye, Thonis, Heracleion. Each of these cities is a reminder that the history of humanity is much richer and more complex than we imagine. But they are also warnings. They remind us that no matter how advanced a civilization may be, it is never completely immune to the forces of nature or its own flaws. What happened to these cities could very well happen to us. After all, rising sea levels, natural disasters, and overexploitation of natural resources are not problems of the past. They are problems of the present. And if we don't learn from the lessons of the past, we run the risk of repeating the same mistakes. Consider the case of Danas. For centuries, this city was a center of commerce and culture, connecting the Mediterranean to the Nile River. But its decline was largely caused by excessive exploitation of natural resources and soil instability. Today, we face similar challenges. Rising sea levels threaten coastal cities around the world, from Miami to Shanghai. And just like the inhabitants of Thonsira, many of these cities are built on unstable terrain, making them even more vulnerable. The question is, are we prepared to face these challenges? Or will we be, like Thonsira, swallowed by the sea? And then there is Yonaguni. If Yonaguni's underwater structures are indeed artificial, it means that an advanced civilization existed more than 10,000 years ago, much earlier than we believe possible. Not only does this challenge the conventional narrative of the story, but it also raises a fascinating question. What else is hidden beneath the sea? And what can these discoveries tell us about human potential? Perhaps Yonaguni is a reminder that the history of humanity is much older and much more mysterious than we imagine. But perhaps the most powerful example is Atlantis. Although its existence has never been proven, the idea of Atlantis continues to capture the imagination of scientists, historians, and dreamers. Why? Because Atlantis isn't just a story about the past. It's a story about the future. It's a reminder that no matter how advanced a civilization may be, it is never completely immune to arrogance, greed, and hubris. And if we're not careful, we could very well become the next Atlantis. But sunken cities aren't just warnings. They're also sources of inspiration. They show us that, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, humanity has the capacity to innovate, adapt, and prosper. They remind us that the ocean, with all its vastness and mystery, is not just a threat. It is also an opportunity. It is a place where we can explore, discover, and learn. And, perhaps most importantly, it is a place where we can reconnect with the past and, in doing so, find a path to the future. Today, sunken cities continue to inspire scientists, historians, and explorers. They challenge us to look at the past with new eyes and to question what we know about our own history. They remind us that the ocean, with all its vastness and mystery, still holds secrets that can change the way we see the world. And they challenge us to think about the future, about how we can learn from the mistakes of the past and build a more resilient, more sustainable, and more connected world. But perhaps the greatest legacy of sunken cities is this. They remind us that human history is not a straight line. It is a cycle, a loop, where the past and the present are constantly meeting. And, just as the sea keeps the secrets of these cities, it also holds the answers to the questions we still don't know how to ask. And so, we return to the initial question: how did these cities end up there? We may never know the full answer, but like Poseidon, the one who shakes land and sea, the ocean will continue to hold its secrets, waiting for us to be ready to discover them.